do want to have a sense of an initial status. And so here I have 3 little clementines, and one of them was in the freezer, so that it would be rather hard, rather firm. What I'm going to do is I'm going to push into this little critter with a moderate amount of force until it stops deforming. And I think that you can see it alter its shape. As I push down on it, it's actually thawed a bit. But you can see that it alters its shape and then it stops. It stops changing. Even if I apply a little bit more force, it stops changing. And that's the position of taking up the slack in a structure. So now that I've taken the slack out of it, now I'm in the meat of this orange, and I can test the integrity of that structure when it is compressed. So I'm going to impart an additional force of approximately the same amount. So if I took 5 pounds of force to compress it, I'm going to give it another 5 pounds. So the total would be 10 pounds. And in spite of the angle you see of my arm, I'm going to push straight down to the floor. And, oh, that critter's really, really tight, really stiff. And so the freezing did a good job of making that very, very dense. And that's what a hypomobile joint feels like and looks like. You might be able to take up some slack initially because you're taking up movement in surrounding structures, but as soon as you get into the meat of the joint, the meat of this orange, it becomes very, very stiff and non-yielding when you use the same amount of force to impart the spring. So I'm going to show you the extreme of that. This little critter, I'm not going to eat this guy. He's pretty darn soft there, you see. So this represents a soft joint, a hypermobile joint, in which when you take up the slack, it's got this boggy feel, and it moves quite a bit before you get to a point of having taken up the slack. As a matter of fact, it feels like it's just going to continue to deform. That is what a hypermobile joint feels like. Now, if I were to stay with it until it stops deforming, so right about now it stopped deforming, and now I'm going to impart a spring in a specific direction. So I'm going to push straight down to the floor, and it just goes and goes and goes. So there isn't really a sense of recoil, okay? You'll see that recoil when I do a normal joint, a normal clementine orange. So this one has nice turgor, nice hydration. It indents a little bit, but you can see it recoils nicely. So when I push to take up the slack, there's a distinct endpoint. Let's imagine that took 5 pounds of force and that the force is straight down towards the floor. So now I'm going to impart another 5 pounds, and here it comes, 1, 2, 3, boom. And I let go and it bounces back up into the position in which the slack is taken up, okay? So the orange starts out being this tall, and then I push down and take up the slack, okay, to an end point. And then I spring it and let it recoil, spring it and let it recoil. And then when I let go, it will recoil further back up towards the initial point. In this example, it's taking a little while, okay? So this would be a very worthwhile thing for you to practice. And you can practice on body parts, and you can practice on oranges. I want to emphasize that we do want to feel the recoil in the structure. And so I'm going to demonstrate it on this ligament. So what you do on any structure is you take up the slack, which means you push into it in a specific direction to where it stops moving. And that is called taking up the slack. Then from that point, you want to spring it forward using approximately the same force. So here's a forward spring, and you let it come back. You let it recoil to the loaded position. That allows you to repeat the test if you're not sure about your findings. And you can not only feel how it moves forward, but you can also feel the recoil. So maybe we should rename this as a spring-recoil test. A friend of mine, a manual therapist, when he was learning my work, he referenced this method of doing a spring test as springing with awareness. And while it's been mocked on the internet, it does carry a specific meaning. And it does force you to slow down and to pay attention. And you also pay attention to the other 50% of the information, to the recoil. Whereas a traditional spring test, you just take up the slack, spring it forward, and grade it. I can't do that. I could never go back to doing that because the recoil information is so very informative. And so that's the end of this short section, this short video. I know I talked too much. And so please recall the rules of 3, and you can practice that. And if you can buy 3 oranges, put one in the freezer, and then you can put a couple of holes in one and squeeze out some of the juice, and that will be the hypermobile structure. You'll have one good firm one, and then the one from the freezer will be very, very hard and represent hypomobility. I hope that's helpful to you. Thank you very much.